Welcome to the Hunchtime podcast. I'm delighted and honoured to say that I'm here with Fergo's very own Aifric Keogh, part of the rowing team that won the first ever Irish women's medal for rowing at the Olympics in Tokyo. Aifric, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're back home. I'd say it's been a whirlwind.
Yeah, so I think I've lost track of the days of the week at this stage, but I've been back in Ireland now, kind of just about 10 days, I'd say, and kind of have been going between Galway and Dublin. So I'm actually in Dublin at the moment, but I was up in Galway there for the weekend, hanging out with a couple of friends.
Nice. And yeah, what I'd like to start with is just how you got into rowing initially. Like I'm sure this question has been asked of you, and it's something I'm really cognizant of. That you've probably got so many of these interviews, but we'll try to make it as different as possible. But you like say your first day when you went rowing. Why?
So I remember I went to the Jazz Secondary School, and I remember they had obviously the usuals: hockey, basketball, and then they obviously had a rowing club too, which is quite unusual for a school. It's actually not that unusual in Galway because the Jazz and the Bish both have one. But as I got older, I started to realize like there's only I think three schools in the whole country, four schools in the whole country that have rowing clubs. So yeah, just because it was something really, really different, I decided to give it a go. I didn't actually know anyone going to the school when I started, so I also kind of saw it as an opportunity to make some friends. So yeah, I remember my first day, I think I was actually about an hour late because I couldn't even find the rowing club. It's hidden kind of in the NUIG campus, but there's about five rowing clubs in Galway city in general. So I think I actually ended up at every single one of them before I found the Jazz Rowing Club that morning. So yeah, I went in, signed up. There was probably about 30 or 40 girls from my year there that day. And we didn't actually get on the water that day. I think a few of them had gone on the water during the summer. They held some summer camps. But I remember I was away at the time, my family, so I had to skip those that year, unfortunately. And I remember being a bit paranoid that I would be, miles behind everyone just because I missed those few days in the summer camp. But the coaches kind of said, no, don't worry about it. Kind of show up in September when you're settled in school. So yeah, that first day we went down, we signed up, and we just got on the rowing machine and just kind of worked through the technique. And I remember at the time the club only had two rowing machines. So I think we had to literally just take it in turns and watch each other for probably about an hour or two. And yeah, like it was just, I think I came home, my parents were like, well, how was it? How was rowing? And I was like, well, we actually didn't do any rowing. We just sat on like an exercise machine. So it was really, really slow to start, to be honest. Getting out in the boat was almost like it was a big operation getting, I think it was boats of eight at the time. So you'd probably have two experienced people sitting in the boat to kind of keep us afloat, and then kind of taking in turns, six newbies going in and out. But yeah, rowing, it does take a couple of weeks to get up and running to actually kind of learn the basics and to be able to move the boat properly kind of as a group.
That was probably pretty good for bonding. The fact that you only had two rowing machines because you're just chatting to people when you're waiting.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
But and then like obviously you kept with it after first year. Did you win anything competitively in the Jazz as you came through, or when was the first time you thought, Jesus, I might actually be pretty good at this?
I think for the first like few years, maybe up until transition year, I didn't really take it that seriously. I was doing basketball and hockey as well. So I rowing like was on every day essentially. But I used to only go at the weekend, so I used to kind of fill my midweek trainings with basketball and hockey and the likes. And then I just kind of used to show up to the rowing club at the weekends. And I remember that kind of being a bit of an issue amongst the older girls who were kind of taking it more seriously, that, myself and a few of my friends were only kind of weekend rowers, I suppose. Um, so yeah, I didn't take it too seriously. I do remember winning, I remember winning my first race. Like it was a junior 14 category, I think. And it was in Limerick. And I remember there was a second year girl, she was young enough to row with us, and she was over the moon that we won. And myself and my friends were kind of like, oh yeah, no big deal, because I suppose it was our first race and we won, so we didn't kind of understand the kind of the big deal about it. But yeah, I think we lost every other race then after that. So we quickly started to learn like the wins weren't that often. But yeah, I think our first big win was when we were in transition year and we won what's called the junior eights. So it's kind of like the flagship event for when you're in school. Um, so we won, yeah, the Jeds won that in 2008, I think it was. And I remember it was such a big deal. Our principal went down, and yeah, that was kind of, we came second the year before. So that was kind of 2 years of hard work went into that. And, I'm still really good friends with all those girls. And it's something that we always kind of look back on, and probably one of the kind of best moments for me in the sport.
Really, yeah. It's
Mm.
amazing the things that stand out that some people wouldn't think when you look back at a sporting career. Moments that mightn't seem as massive, but yeah, no, that's an interesting journey. When did you give up basketball and stuff and fully commit?
So I think it was I used to kind of play for the school and then a club as well. And as I kind of went through TY in fifth year, I started to just play for the school because I kind of like training was kind of during lunch or kind of convenient times like that, so I wasn't eating into rowing too much. So I was probably about 16, 17 when I slowly started to kind of focus on rowing bit more. I was also really, really bad at hockey, so I don't know why I kept that up so long. And I think Dangan hockey pitch was also an absolute trek away from Furbo, so I think my parents were kind of pushing for me to give that one a miss, seeing as I was like terrible at it too. But so yeah, hockey was definitely first to go. I think I was in fifth year maybe when I gave that one up. And then basketball, like the season was quite short in school anyway, so it didn't really interfere. And like the majority of rowing races would normally be kind of when school finished up anyway in the summertime, so they didn't really clash too much with each other.
Yeah.
um so yeah, I think I kept up basketball up until leaving cert, but again it was only like once a week, but a match every now and again. And then rowing, yeah, rowed through. I actually gave it up for a few months in my leaving cert year just because all of my friends had quit too, and our like crew at the time was, I was kind of pushed down to like the younger group, let's say, that were coming up behind me. And I remember there was kind of a lot of pressure for me to go into the single scull, which is a boat by myself. And for me, that just, I had zero enjoyment from that. What I enjoyed at the time was rowing in the big eights and fours with all my friends, and suddenly kind of they were all gone because they were either focusing on their leaving cert or they were too old. And I think the enjoyment was just kind of zapped out of it for me at that point. As well, I suppose I was kind of hanging around with a lot of people, and there was 18th birthday parties every weekend, and all those kind of tempting things that kind of, I was starting to fall out of love with the sport, I think, a bit, because I kind of was resenting all the things that I was missing because of it.
Yeah.
So I decided kind of, I think it was around maybe March, April, I was going to quit to focus on study. But like really what I was doing was just kind of sleeping in at the weekends and studying late anyway, and just going to a few parties at the weekend. But I quickly started back then once my exams were finished and I had kind of all that out of my system. I started training again the summer of my exams before I went into college.
Okay, that 18, say 17, 18, 19-year-old window is deadly. They say especially for female athletes where you see
Yeah.
them fall off. I don't know. Did you know why? Is it because people leave school and or move to college, start partying, whatever it might be?
Yeah. Yeah, I really think so. Like, because like I think only because I knew I was actually good at rowing that kind of kept me there. Like okay, not that my friends weren't good at it, but like a few of them were kind of taking years out here and then, they were deciding, oh, I'm not going to row this year, I'm going to enjoy college, get the full student experience. And they probably did really enjoy it, but then like sooner or later most of them kind of came back
Yeah.
the following year or maybe a year or two later. A lot of them were kind of dipping in and out of it, whereas I kind of did the full 4 year stint while I was in NUIG. And like, to be honest, I did miss out on a lot. Like a lot of them had like really good relationships with like their classmates, and I just didn't have the time to be going to class parties. And also my course, like there was probably about 100 people in my course, so I just didn't get to know them. Like we were such a big group.
Yeah.
Like I did have a few close friends just from kind of lab work and things like that, but you know, that's definitely something I did miss out on. So yeah, I think, you know, the whole social scene is a big pull away from sport, especially a sport that there's such a huge commitment to. You know, maybe there are other sports where you're only kind of training maybe twice, 3 times a week, but because we're training every single day at very anti-social hours, I do think it's definitely a big decision for girls and boys, I think, to keep on. I think though the only kind of saving grace of rowing, and especially when I was in NUIG, like there is a huge social side to the club as well. You know, obviously there's a huge group of people of similar age, and there is the odd party every now and again after a race. So I think as long as that kind of side is there, then you'll definitely kind of retain the numbers. But I think sometimes there is a fear, it's such a serious sport that like you do lose that aspect to it, and people are just getting nothing back from it during the winter where it's just really tough training and, you know, most of the time crap weather, you know.
That's something when I looked into your schedule and some of your other interviews you've done, which are really fantastic. And the thing that struck me the most is that, say, pro rugby players, Connacht or Munster, they can have a game on a Saturday, go out, go on the beer, maybe have a few drinks on Sunday, then come back, maybe train a little bit Monday, and your schedule seems so much more intense. Um,
Yeah.
it's probably is one of the harder disciplines, I imagine, and maybe that sort of scares some people away who wouldn't be as mentally tough.
Yeah, definitely. I think like for us, we do get the odd Sunday off, but like most of the time we get like our travel day will be our day off if we're going to an event or a camp. And, you know, if we are competing abroad, we are flown home that day. It's like most of the time, like we are rushing to get boats back on a trailer and legging into the airport to make it home. So sometimes it is really hard to find that kind of time to socialize together. And then also you're kind of like, well, I'm with these people every single day, like 24/7. Sometimes when someone suggests a night out, you're like, oh, honestly, I actually couldn't think of anything worse. Like, you know, you just want your own time to yourself. But I think it is important. I think over like the last year, especially with kind of the pandemic and everything being shut, like, you know, I do think it is important to, like I said, make the time and really make the effort with the group you're in to kind of do have a bit of fun. Otherwise, it's just kind of misery 24/7, like, and you're not going to get enjoyment out of it.
Yeah. Um, and just to go on to the next thing, well, let's talk about sort of the build up to the Olympics. Like you won silver in the Europeans. This going into that, how did you feel? Like were you confident going into the Europeans? Did you know a lot of the other boats you were against?
Well, we were only kind of put together as a crew at that stage about 3 weeks, I think. So we honestly didn't have a clue where we would end up. Like we were ranking quite high in the prognostics compared to Paul and Finton, who are obviously now the Olympic champions. Um, so you know, like we did have that kind of confidence in it, but at the same time, I've seen many crews who are always ranked high in training go out and race, and it's just they don't get the result. Like, you know, so you don't want to always kind of rely on that. Like yes, it does give you confidence, but you can't just kind of rely on that, I suppose, going into the race. So yeah, going into Europeans, like I knew we were fast, but again, I just didn't know how fast the rest of the field was. We had raced another European Championship in October, and we had come third in that. Um, so we did know to look out for the Dutch and the Italians because they finished ahead of us. But then we ended up beating, I think, the Italians by 10 seconds in our heat in the following event. So yeah, a lot can change, you know, over time, especially over a winter. You know, like when we had raced in October, literally everyone had just come out of lockdown, and it was kind of what you could put together in the space of like 2 months. Some countries that obviously had a lot more time together than others, and you could kind of see that in the results in October. But I think in April it was probably a bit more, probably a bit more of a real result, I suppose, because I think at that stage a lot of the nations did have a kind of a winter, like winter's training done together. But for our crew, yeah, we'd only had a few weeks together, so the silver was a really great result for us. And the fact that we were only point 0.4 off the Dutch was great. and because I think we were 4 or 5 seconds off them in October when we had last raced them. So yeah, it did give us a lot of confidence, especially going into the next block of training before qualifiers.
And also that that would give you something to work on, because maybe I know the European Championships would have been a massive thing, but was the Olympics still in your mind and you're thinking, okay, we have something to work with now? If like we can definitely get zero point 0.4 of a second back on the Dutch, and then who knows? Or are you thinking that far ahead?
Um, yeah, yes and no. I suppose you are thinking, okay, we're only X off the next crew, but at the same time, you've no idea where each country is in their preparations. It was going around after that championships, a lot of Dutch crews were quite close to winning or a little bit off, and it was going around. The gossip was going around that they hadn't done any race prep before that championships, because it was so early that they just, kind of arrived up to it off the back of winter training. Whereas other countries, had done a lot of race prep before it. It's different. Like, countries obviously peak for different events, and especially in the Olympic year, obviously everyone wants to peak for the Olympics. But for us, we kind of have to ensure we did peak a small bit earlier, because we have to still actually have to qualify for the event. So yeah, like we were close, but I suppose you kind of take it all with a bit of a pinch of salt, not knowing what the other crews had done preparation wise.
Those sort of rumors are as old as time in sport, that the win that wasn't their best crew, or they weren't properly prepared, or a team hadn't been training, something like that.
Yeah,
Those
definitely.
Mindgames, do they go on inside international rowing as well?
Mindgames, is it?
Yeah.
I think so a bit, yeah. Especially I think Instagram is a bit deadly as well. Like at the moment, like, people we put up videos, or, yeah, it could be like a video of a boat rowing, but like you just see silhouettes, you wouldn't see people. And everyone be like pausing the video trying to figure out who's in what boat, and you might be like, oh, did you see so and so swap positions, or that person wasn't in the boat, they must be injured, and oh, the spare is in, or all that type of thing. That type of nonsense goes on. And I think that's why, like, for us, we're kind of under a strict no social rule from our coaches, like, where we just don't put any of our training or any footage up on Instagram or Twitter or anything like that, because just like to kind of, I suppose, keep our head down and keep kind of the chat to a minimum of what's going on in our setup.
Yeah, so no overt use of social media, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Talk about the professional setup, say for maybe girls who want to get into it. What was it like when you first went down? Was it in Inishkara?
Yeah.
What were the first days like down there? How did they approach you to say, "Hey, Aifric"? I assume it was directly from college.
So that's where Inishkara is where the national champs are raced every year. So anyone who rows, and like other races are held there as well, anyone who rows has probably been there before, and they've probably taken a kind of a walk around the National Rowing Centre, and they've probably seen the facilities. So I suppose everyone's aware of what it's like down there, and everyone's kind of walked through the boat sheds and probably stuck their head into the gym and all that. So I think I obviously was aware of what it was like down there. And um, as a junior, you might get called down for selection trials, and so you would have done all your races down there, and you might have kind of hung out, I suppose, for the weekend just racing. So I suppose I kind of had little bits of exposure throughout the years, just through kind of trials and things like that. Um, but I think it obviously is a different story when you kind of totally relocate to training there. I think I was kind of lucky in that, like, when I was under 23, and one other summer when I raced senior worlds, I kind of just spent summers down there. So you might kind of move down there for 6 or 8 weeks, and you'd kind of stay in the student accommodation that would be empty for the summer months. You'd just kind of move in there for a few weeks and just train at the rowing centre. So you're kind of getting tastes of it there as well, like watching. It would have been Sinead at the time, and Paul would have been around. So we kind of would have been watching them just kind of from afar. We would have joined in on some training sessions as well. So I suppose, yeah, I was kind of getting these kind of small bits of exposure every now and then. And I think after I finished my undergrad in NUIG, kind of didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. And so I looked into doing a master's in UCC, and I thought that kind of might be a good way to, not just go down there to full-time train, which can be a bit difficult, you're quite isolated out there. It's like, I think it might be 15, 20 kilometers away from Cork City, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. Um, so I thought it'd be good to have kind of a good balance between study and training. Like the hours weren't too demanding in my master's, so I was able to kind of spend the morning out training, get the morning session, and then kind of head into college for maybe 11 or 12, and then either train with the UCC squad or kind of head back out in the evenings, kind of depending on my schedule. So I think I kind of had a very gradual exposure to the setup. Um, but then I think, oh yeah, then I started to I got a job in Cork, and I was training full time, working full time. And it wasn't until maybe 2018 that I quit my job and I said, okay, I need to start doing this full time to really kind of make an impact and start, you know, like I was getting selected for world championships and world cups at that point, but the boats I was in just weren't, like, they weren't performing that great. And I think, you can't expect yourself to make that jump without kind of, going full time and seeing where you get. I was lucky to be funded at that stage, so I could afford to quit my job and just focus on training. And I think, like you're saying, for anyone coming into it, like, that is the tricky part. The tricky part is when you don't have the funding to kind of go at it full time, and you might be relying on parents or something like that. That's kind of the sticky part where, you're trying to get fast to make an impact, to make it into crews, but you just don't really have the support yet to go at it full time. But I think now it is getting better, because obviously we kind of have a full squad now. We have a four and a pair. We have a few boats to try get into seat wise. Whereas when I was kind of starting out, we were looking to make the boats, like we were the ones trying to make the boats. Whereas I think if you're kind of someone up and coming now, you have an opportunity to just try to take a seat off someone. The boat is already probably fast. So, if you make an impression and you get put in for a day or two and you make the boat faster, then I think you're pretty much laughing. And you should hopefully kind of secure funding that way and, get the opportunity to do it full time as well.
Like, there was a couple of things that you mentioned there that I sort of want to look into. You said, like, you learned little snippets from Sanita and Paul when you were
Mm.
first exposed to that level of athlete, of pro athlete. I imagine the diet and a couple of other things were sort of massive, but what struck you the most, the difference between sort of the high level you were at already and going to that next level?
Yeah, I think, like you're saying, observing what they're eating was a big thing. Just like their routine, watching them come in, how they warm up, um, and I think just like the level of training, like, for me, a big training session might have been like 16, 20 kilometers, but when you kind of watch them kind of just push it out an extra 4, 8 kilometers every day, like that really adds up every single day. And obviously you can't just do that overnight. You do have to build into it, but I think just watching them kind of push the limits and push the boundaries, like numbers wise, and the machines and the gym, I think it just shows you that it is possible. Now I have seen a lot of people kind of come down and, in a week or two trying to like become a hero and do like try replicate what people are doing, and they often kind of make mistakes and end up injuring themselves. But I do think it is good to be exposed to it, just to see kind of the benchmark of, for me, it was like, well, okay, Sunita's a double world champion, double European champion. This is what she does in a training day. This is the pace she trains at every day. If I can get close to that, then, maybe I'll start to see some results, similar to her. So yeah, I think it's just kind of surround yourself with people like Sunita and Paul, and you just kind of start to see the high standard that they operate at every day, and try to replicate it.
Gotcha. And now you've replicated Paul and that you've become an Olympic medalist. Was that, like, when did that become like a clear goal for you or something? Was that always in your mind that I can do this,
Not really. Like, to be honest, like, I suppose for us, this year was all about qualifying really. And, when we missed out in 2019, we spent all of 2020, waiting for May to race again to qualify. And then obviously when that all got pushed out another year, we had another winter to go through. And the people who qualified in 2019 squad were kind of like, almost like, okay, well, we're definitely going, it's fine. We're working towards Olympics. And then the rest of us were like, well, we still don't even know if we're bloody going at this stage, you know? And it was just like every session was just like, you know, we've been here for so long, and if we don't go to the Olympics at this stage, then like we have just wasted so much time. So I think it was almost like a desperation at that point. And then I think when we qualified and had the good result at Europeans, like, yeah, a medal at the back of our minds was the target. But I think, you know, you kind of put that out of your mind straight away, and you kind of set the short-term goals and focuses that the crew has. You know, it might be technical or physiological, and you just kind of focus on that. Because I think if you know, almost think of the end result too much, you'll just kind of get lost in the process, and you won't really make much progress, really. And I think it's kind of almost distracting as well. Like, I think whereas if you have the process, you can kind of fall in line with the routine and work on something every day, essentially.
That's something I always hear you mention in interviews. It sounds like you've been exposed to a good bit of sports psychology, or is that something you'd be interested in? And the second part of that is, you all seem so mentally strong. All the interviews I've seen from, in a way, unbelievably relaxed, but also, you know, you don't seem to get too overly hyped and stuff. But is that the result of, say, like exposure to a sports psychologist, or is it just sort of your demeanors mesh really well with being a pro athlete?
A bit of both, really. Like, we do work with Kate Kirby. She's the lead sports psychologist with the institute. But I think, to be honest, like, we kind of laugh, like, in a cruel way. I think our selection is honestly the worst thing you'll ever go through. So like, the Olympic Games is like the prize at the end of it. Like, racing at the Olympics is like, why would you get, for me it's like, why would you get stressed about that when like the stress was actually making the boat and all the selection you had to go through to get to that point. I think, you know, as tough as it was, it made us all very resilient. And, you know, to come through the other side of that procedure and almost doing it twice, like we did all this selection in 2020, and I think our last trial there was zero point 0.4 of a second between four people, and we were all just like, I can't do that again. Like, we were in Italy, it was literally when COVID was coming through. I think it was February, March time, and COVID was just coming, and we were in northern Italy, literally where it first came into Europe. And we were, they were like, we had done I think maybe 6 races, and there was talks of going back out to do another round, and we were like, oh my god, I can't do it again. Because at that point it was like, we were all so close that if someone won the next race, it would have been something very small that went wrong for someone else, you know.
Yeah.
But we had to kind of leg it home at that point. Like, COVID was coming, and we were staying in the Australian Institute of Sport. It's this like unreal European base for Australian Olympic athletes, and when they're not in Europe, it's like free to rent out for other teams. So we were staying there, but they were actually closing because of COVID. So we had to kind of boot it home back to Ireland, and the trials were kind of unfinished essentially at that stage. But then obviously it became clear in the next week or two that everything was being cancelled, and there was kind of no need to do any more selection trials. So I think, you know, having gone through that in 2020, and then for it to all happen again in 2021, like, the racing is the fun part. Like, that's why we train, that's why we row. Like, yeah, you have nerves and you have maybe a bit of stress, but like, I don't think it's anything in comparison to what we go through during the winter.
Yeah, and previous to that, you had been injured in 2019, which I imagine was pretty scary. And did you come home at that time and just take a little bit of time, a couple of weeks out, or how did you deal with it?
It wasn't, it was an illness, it wasn't an injury. So I actually started to feel unwell in one of the training camps, and I came home, and there was kind of a few weeks of, I don't know what the hell was going on with me. My training was just dipping massively, and I actually ended up having blood clots in my lungs, and like, couldn't breathe, couldn't even get up, like, was in agony. Um, so I ended up in hospital for a week with that. I think it was coming up to the European Championships, and they had to totally like rejug all the crews. So that was May time, I think. And, you know, like, half of the support staff were like, you're lucky to be alive, like, don't even think of like finishing out the season. Whereas the coaches were probably a bit more keen to get me back in for the World Championships, which like was the qualifiers for Tokyo at that point. And like for me, my whole winter, like, well, not even that winter, like last year's of training, I just thought it was all just like going up in smoke, like everything was falling apart for me right when I needed it all to come together. But I was kind of like, look, whatever, there's a good group of girls there, hopefully they'll qualify the boats. And if they do, then I can come back the following year and try get a seat. Um, but anyway, as it worked out in the end, I did make it back for the World Championships, and the girls qualified the pair, and we were really unlucky to qualify the four. But like obviously it was a kind of a blessing in disguise then, obviously getting the extra year, because it really obviously did allow me to come back to full health, kind of following my time off.
I imagine it was really tough to build it up again. Like I had pneumonia years ago when I was playing hurling, and to come back to hurling and Gaelic football and soccer after that, it was just, you were really eager to come back, but your lungs just wouldn't let you. Like, how long did it take you to sort of? Did you end up losing a lot of weight? How long did it take you to build back up to where you were?
Um, I don't really know how long it took, because to be honest, I think I was just overcompensating with effort to get back to like the numbers I was pulling. And I was probably fooling myself, being like, oh yeah, I'm back on target. I can do X kilometers at a certain pace. That's where I was, but I think I was probably working way too hard for that. And I think I was focusing so hard on numbers and effort that like my technique just went totally out the window. And I was just like literally rowing like a dog to try stay up, up near the top, or trying to get back into the top boats. And like, I was probably actually, like, I know we do go backwards, but I probably was literally rowing backwards at that point. And I really wasn't enjoying it. And I just kind of, we still weren't qualified. And I was like, at this stage, I just need to get this year done. Like, I just wanted it over. And, and then when it got like postponed by the extra year, I was just like, oh my God, I can't handle another year. But I think it was when COVID happened and I went home back to Galway for like maybe 3 months. I think that's when I really started to, I suppose, recover properly. Which was, that was almost like a year later. And I think having that time at home and like look back in hindsight, like when I went to the Worlds a few weeks after getting diagnosed and being sick, and the whole winter's training I did, like I really don't think I was well at that point, and I don't think I was recovered. But I just had kind of tunnel vision of getting back to where I was and making it to the Olympics, that I was just kind of fooling myself into thinking that I was okay. But then I think the time at home really allowed me to kind of recover properly, and not have the stress of selection and all these targets all the time. Like like we did do a lot of kind of fitness testing while we were at home to kind of keep us on our toes, but I think it wasn't as pressurized. It was just kind of like ticking boxes essentially. So yeah, I do think it took me much longer than I thought it had taken me at the time, but when I did kind of come back, I definitely stepped on from where I was prior to it. So I do think it was probably the guts of maybe 6 to 9 months really that took it to get back.
It sounds like your drive and motivation kind of had you on a treadmill, and you were kind of looking to get home just to escape that pressure you put on yourself a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's talk a little bit about the day. A couple of days before the race. First of all, what did you imagine the Olympic Village to be like, and what was it like? Like if you look back at, if you'd heard the stories from like London and stuff, you imagine like it's just sex crazed lunacy. But like, what was it in reality? And like, did you get to mix with other teams and meet new people? And what was the Olympic Village like in Tokyo?
So when we arrived to Japan, we spent 5 days in like a holding camp, which was a really nice, like 5-star hotel. So relaxed. It was lovely. And then we drove into the village. And I remember just like being shocked at the size of it, like sky-rise apartments, blocks for each countries, and like the flags everywhere. Like that really made it. I think each country kind of went like above and beyond, essentially showing off. Like you could spot the big nations like Australia, New Zealand, GB. Like they really kind of like kitted out their blocks. Like yeah, like there was like a telephone box outside the GB building. Like they literally must have shipped over huge props just to make it feel like home for their athletes. So yeah, GB had like Union Jack deck chairs, and the whole thing decorated. Australia had like their whole like bottom floor just like wrapped in the like Australian colors and flags. So that was really cool. Just like driving through, you could definitely like see every country's base. And as far as mixing, like up until we were finished, like not really at all, to be honest. We really kept our own group, um, just out of fear of like COVID. We were getting tested every day. We were aware that there was 3 positive tests, or cases, sorry, within the Dutch rowing team. So it was kind of close to home in that sense. And they had to withdraw their men's sculler, and I think their head coach tested positive too, and someone else in the sports staff, I think. So yeah, I think there was just a big fear at that point coming up to racing. We really just stayed to ourselves. But once we finished, yeah, I think we all relaxed a bit. And I don't know really what the nightlife was like in other Olympics, but we didn't really have many options here. So we just kind of used to have a few drinks kind of down. Like there was a park where the famous Olympic rings were, where everyone used to take their pictures, and just kind of used to chill out there for an hour or two. And I don't know how, but it was literally just all rowers in that location. I have no idea how everyone managed um to get to that location. I suppose we were all finishing up on the same days, and you kind of had to leave anyway 48 hours after you're finished. But yeah, we kind of hung out with a few rowers there, and actually we made good friends with the Irish swimmers. Um, so we were hanging out with them as well. Um, but it wasn't as wild as like the other stories that I heard from other Olympics. I think just because there was a bit of security around the place, just to make sure that there was nothing was kind of getting out of hand or anything like that. And obviously there was no leaving the village either. So yeah, I'll have to go to Paris to see the nightlife for the next one.
That's what I was gonna say. Did the gravity of the whole occasion make you really yearn for that 4 years time again in Paris?
Yes and no. Like I suppose, part of me is like quit while you're ahead. You got an Olympic medal, like bow out. You're 29, like it was good, enjoy it. Whereas the other half of me is like, I really feel like our training like has really stepped on the last year or two, and I think we have great momentum as a group. The rest of the girls are so young. They're 22, 23, 24. So there's definitely another cycle in them. So yeah, I don't know, like I'm kind of 50-50. Like obviously now, like yeah, I'd love to go, but there's a winter ahead of me, and more than one obviously as well. And the selection process again is just so difficult that like I could go back and I might not even make the boat.
Yeah.
So, and then there's also the flip side of like heading into the Olympics, like our team, the Rowing Ireland team, you could have picked out 4 or 5 crews that were medal contenders. And yes, we came home with 2, and that was amazing. And that's the most we've ever gotten. Up until Rio, we didn't even have any Olympic medals. But you could go and you could be on the bad side of it next time, and you could miss out on a final or miss out on a medal. So it's a high risk, high reward situation, and it's something you kind of have to think about.
I think for lay people like myself, and for people who've never been in like the high intensity professional world of professional athletes, like we kind of see you guys as demigods, where you just rock up once every 4 years. Usain Bolt, eat chicken nuggets, run world record,
Mm,
but like that's only letting us see a crack of all the unbelievable heartache and stress and pressure that you have to endure to get to that point. Um,
mm.
but Afric, just finally, let's give a shout out to Big Strong Girls. Do you want to explain to our listeners and one who mightn't have heard what this what this is, what's the idea behind it?
Okay, so Big Strong Girls is the group of female athletes down at the rowing center training. We just decided to put an Instagram page together, I suppose, to inject a bit of fun into our lives in those boring training camps. So yeah, it was just somewhere essentially to kind of keep everyone updated on whether we were in Italy or Cork and what we were up to, and kind of around racing too. It's kind of a good channel to keep up on when like certain crews are racing times and where you can watch them, and I suppose kind of behind the scenes as well, into our training. So that's how, yeah, it just started as an Instagram group, but it's gained huge momentum. Like we've done a few TikToks that have kind of taken off, and we even designed some Big Strong Girls one pieces, which is like so cool to see when you're out. Like my boyfriend is up coaching in Dublin, and he said he looks out like onto the lake, and literally there's Big Strong Girls one pieces in every boat. And it's even funny, like we have a few of the guys, we got a few boys versions made too, and they all got on the bandwagon and bought them as well. And I remember like at one point sitting on the start line for one of our selection races in Italy, and you know, we try wear our club colors like when we're racing, even selection wise, like behind closed doors everyone makes an effort to race to wear their racing colors. But when you're kind of 4 or 5 races deep and you've run out of kit, I remember just looking around, and I think there was Big Strong Girls one piece in every single boat on the start line, and I was just kind of laughing, being like, what did we create? Like, what is this? Like a bright pink one piece just sitting there on the start line in Italy. So yeah, like to be honest, it's just a bit of fun for us, but I think it's good as well, like just kind of make it, I suppose, a bit more visible, like to the next generation coming up. And like, you know, when we were growing up, we were always like when I was in the Jazz, I think I was the same height that I am now when I was like 12 or 13, and I was just huge, like. And going down to a rowing club, like you know, a few of the old lads coaching would always be like, "Oh, you're a big strong girl, you'd make a good rower," you know. I think when you're like 11 or 12, you're a bit self-conscious, like that someone's calling you a big strong girl, you know. So I think, yeah, you know, we're kind of just trying to show that, you know, it's a good thing, it's not something to be self-conscious about. And you know, obviously when you're a rower, almost like the taller you are the better, and you know, you want those long levers. And so yeah, I think we're just trying to, in a fun way, and also, you know, send out the message that that's a good thing and not to be embarrassed about it or anything like that.
100%. It's really cool, and definitely anybody who's watching this, check out their TikTok, check out their Instagram. Make sure you like it, send it to all your friends, and to get a really good insight into sort of all the athletes and all the boats, and buy some Big Strong Girls gear because it's class.
Mm.
Aifric, thanks so much. You're going to be an icon to the next generation. I don't know if you know it now, but yeah, everybody in Furbo is so proud of you, and it's been such a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.